Hi, folks. How are you? Brothers, sisters, cousins, chefs, culinarians. Sorry we are a little bit late. Like the dummy, I didn't make sure that the broadcast was going before actually started. So my name is Chef Adam Lamb, and I am the producer and host of Chef Life Radio, the podcast dedicated to assisting you become the best version of yourself, both personally and professionally. And this is Friday Food for Thought. Last week, I attended a workshop. It was about 4 days long, and it had a lot to do with self-care and self-nurture. And at the very end, the last day, one of the last things that the facilitator said is, the future is community. And I didn't really understand what he meant. Like, is it of a community? Is it the community? What the hell did he talking about? And even though I didn't know, I did know somebody who has a great deal of experience in both creating, nurturing, maintaining, and growing a community. And that's why I'm so tickled to welcome Chef Maria Campbell to the show. Hi, Chef.
Hey.
Just going to go throw your banner in there. That's it. Right there, Chef Maria Campbell. And she is not only the founder of Cooks Who Care with her husband, Scott, but she's also started a new venture called 1 Degree Leadership Coaching, which is a really exciting development. So, Chef, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I got to say, you do amazing stuff. I know it's just you putting all these beautiful things out there in the world. And, it's a lot. And it's polished. It's polished.
You know, I, especially with your episode, because of the depth of the conversation, I really wanted it to be great. I understand from creating enough content that if there's any distractions whatsoever, bad audio, bad video, then nobody can really focus on the message of what's going on. So it took me probably about almost 2 months because I kept thinking, okay, there's an element missing, and then finally it all came together. And we just released it last Friday, as well as we released a members only on the doc episode, which is really cool. Usually those are reserved for subscribers of the show. But if you want to check out that podcast, you can go to chefliferadio.com. And so without further ado, Chef, the hell does community mean to you?
Oh my God. It's everything. I thought it to be the only thing that would help us solve what we want to do, which is to change kitchen culture. And I can't be in a room by myself going, hey, you know what I want to do? And be a soldier of one or a soldier of two with my husband. It's not possible.
I think when most people think about community or they try to glean a definition for it, I think they're thinking of something external to the environment, right? But isn't a community and the internal community just as important? I mean, I guess I get tripped up on, is it culture or is it community? Like, what the hell are we fucking trying to create?
Well, you have to have both to have the community itself. Like if there's no culture, no one will align with it.
Sure.
So, it really was having a purpose that if I were to find other individuals knowing that I'm under-resourced, don't have funding, and there's no hands to really lift this, how could I do this without getting burnt out and defeat the mission that I'm trying to push through? And the only answer to me through research was collaboration, community, power in numbers. I mean, all these things even developed more as we kept growing, but it was the necessary leverage that we needed in order to make change. The messaging, people would always say like, oh, people don't know how it is in the industry, the food networks, portraying the wrong message. Well, they have a lot of funding dollars. They have a huge production arm, where they're putting out content constantly. They're content machines, right? So of course that message is out there in the world. I'm not surprised by it. And that's when I thought, well, we need to be a production company, putting those messages out there, sharing our connections and contacts and saying, well, let's hear another story. Let's hear it from another perspective and then be that platform.
You bring up a great point. We have a shared friend, Chef Jensen Cummings, who is a force of nature unto himself. and who has basically created, by will alone, an organization based around Best Served Podcast that now he's grown to 17 team members, and they have shifted their focus to like, okay, I'm just going to get on a mic and publish it through Anchor. And I think some of the first episodes, he was like in his car right after the gym, trying to put like towels around the window so he could get some soundproofing. But now I think that they're inspired mightily by their mission. But he always says, always, that in this day and age, every single hospitality company must also be a media company.
Yeah.
Now, to restaurant owners or to chefs or managers, they might think, okay, so what does that mean? Am I posting, static pictures of my food on Instagram? Am I in a bubble on Facebook in another chef group, and that's kind of like my only outlet? Like it seems to me that a lot of the problems or issues that we're facing right now, lack of staffing, cultures that need to be realigned, that's never ever going to get solved in a bubble.
100%.
How did you go about building your community in Philadelphia? You had this great idea.
Yep.
You saw a need.
Yep.
You did your research, and then what?
Oh, it was a lot of research. But I think for us, it was that experiential discovery, because what I wanted was qualitative research, right? So I wanted to know, what does the community need first? I didn't know at that time. So we chose a platform. YouTube was the first one. It was like, all right, let's get on YouTube. My husband and I invested in about almost $30,000 worth of video equipment. Between ourselves and another chef, Igor, who's worked with Scott forever, and a friend of our family, just because he was his sous chef at the time when he was working at the country club. And we took our days off to interview 100 people, go to their facility, make a highly produced video, and post it weekly on YouTube. Like, people don't understand how much energy it takes to create content and then share it as just like your own self.
Absolutely.
And so we were doing that. I still can't believe we were doing that, because it definitely was against everything we believe as far as like burnout. We were staying up late, like we weren't taking a day off, but it was so important to be like, we got to do this quickly, because if I have to talk to 100 people, I'm not going to know until I get to the end of like, what do we need to do? And it took almost 100, which now I see the pattern has been a number since our origin story is like 100% committed, 100 stories. Like, I never saw it until we've been around for almost 6 years now, trying to, connect. It took us 3 years to form the community. So we spent a long time trying to iron out the words. What's the right language? What's the culture? What's our purpose? What's our exchange? What's our value to people? Like, why would they even participate? And so that took me 3 years. And I would just tell people, release early, release often. I always believed in that. And I couldn't believe how I can connect with people just by telling them about something that doesn't even exist yet.
Right.
And it was enough. It was enough for people to see how passionate I was about the subject of trying to do something. I was still learning and putting myself out there to go like, I don't know the answer, but I'm working towards something here. And then, we went through lots of rounds of trial and error, but listening was my number one job.
So when you're doing these interviews, you might have a spec list of questions, but really what you're doing is you're just letting them fill in all the blanks for you.
Yeah, letting them share their knowledge and also admit things that were challenging, because I was asking people before I'd meet with them, I'd give them a set list of questions. And then I'd also ask them that I say, people don't know this story that you're about to tell. Like, we don't know it. And I'm asking you if you will please get humble and if you please will get vulnerable and really share the real truth, because there's a lot of shame in our industry for the things that we've done, the things that we've performed, and I'm like, these interviews will be useless if people are just gonna give me fluff,
Right.
right?
Sure.
And so I think that the first couple of years was hard because I had a lot to prove to people, to say, like, please trust me. I'm gonna hold these stories true. I'm not gonna, do anything in harm's way that this would be harmful to you, that this is a safe place for you to talk about things. And I was able to do that in a way that I felt I was trying to be as respectful as possible to everyone's unique story.
So I missed a question. And thank you for that context, because I think it's really important, because we come from an industry that is based around instant gratification. It's 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 15 minutes, boom, and you put that plate in the window and nobody has to tell you that it's awesome, because you're like, oh, that's all great.
Right.
So what was it that you saw in Philadelphia that convinced you that you needed to build a community? What was your why?
Well, my why, my personal why, is providing actionable care to people, and that's because I didn't receive it in that way, right? But then the pattern kept coming up that I was teaching at the Art Institute of Philadelphia at the time. Chefs were saying, I need people. It's like, it still is always the same, but just now it's way more,
Right.
I need people, but I need good people.
Right.
And and then I would get sad when employers would turn down individuals because they didn't want to do the work of mentoring, right? Like, there was a piece where, like, I'm going to give you something, but they already have to have the skill and they already got to be great for me to take them. I'm not taking anybody that's not, because I don't have time for that, right? And then, so I'm hearing the side of, like, students who are so eager, and especially at that point, gosh, do we miss those days? Okay. Of people being so eager to work in our industry. And we were like, no, not you. You're not okay for this. We would pluck, individuals and say, we choose that, we think that you're not okay with it, rather than going, let me uplift you, or I think this would be good for your skill set. And so that piece, the communication was, like, not aligned. It was always like this. And I started, even at that point, bringing in chefs and managers to come talk to the class. They think, like, oh, I'm going to see who I'm going to get, when I actually just wanted a conversation with them about, like, this is reality versus your vision of it. And I'm being kind, but there's a misalignment.
So, Maria, why did you take it on, though? I mean, again, my experience is that very often we're so busy and siloed in our operations that really, the next building could be on fire and we wouldn't know it. And so when we start to hear something or we see a trend, do you think that, maybe human nature is to kind of, like, put your head in the sand and hope that someone else is going to pick it up for you?
100%. Like, I've always been the person to raise my hand, try something first. I'm definitely the jump in the deep end of the pool, even if I don't know the outcome.
The depth, right?
Oh yeah, I'm like, I don't even know how deep it is. I'll jump in it. I've always been that way, and then I'm very quick to make a decision that if I don't feel that it's right, like, once I jump and I swim for a little bit, if I think, this doesn't feel right, I definitely will back out of it. I'm quick to decide. It scares the shit out of my husband, because he's always like, he's more like, I need more facts and I need to gain this. And we have a great yin and yang, relationship.
Typically the masculine nature is to, not talk about the problem, but, wrestle it to the ground in our minds until we beat it into submission, come up with a solution, and then talk about it.
Yeah.
So I totally get that. No, I need all the facts first, and then we go.
Yeah.
Not to say, but Was there a specific event when you finally said, no, I can't wait any longer? I actually have to start doing this.
It didn't take me long. Like I brought in probably like maybe a dozen different chefs from the industry, and I heard they were all saying the same story, and that made me concerned because I'm like, all right, this isn't just a few people with this opinion. This is almost everyone. So I felt I had enough information to go, it's got to be me. Let me just do it. Let me try it. And I'm not afraid to fail in something. Like I'm not afraid to put myself out there and go, you know what, if this doesn't work, it's okay. I'm very detailed to like get to an answer where some people are like, Maria, when are you going to get this Cooks Who Care thing off the ground? But I still am like, I'm putting myself out there, and I know a lot of people don't do that. So that gave me the confidence to go, it has to be me. And I had the support of my husband, which if I didn't have his support, I wouldn't have continued. And I just saw too many relationships fall off the deep end to go, this is a cultural thing. It's not going to change with just a few conversations.
Right. I think the statistics are, it takes anywhere between 7 to 10 years to change a company's culture, right? You walk in, you see something, create a plan, and it's not necessarily changing the boss's mind, but it's actually going all the way down to the granular level and having those conversations where people all of a sudden start to trust that change is going to happen because, we've all been sold a story once or twice in our careers and things stayed the same. How long, because I can't believe it's been 6 years already. How long after you decided you were going to take action and put all this work into it that you thought to yourself, no, this has got some legs? Because in my own experience, being a change maker or a facilitator for change is kind of a lonely place, especially when you see it before everyone else does. And they're convinced that nothing has to change because, well, fuck, it's been this way forever. There's no need to change it. Everybody's making their profits. People are still getting paid. And, a little bit more grist for the mill. Why not?
Yep.
How long after you started did you actually start to see results that kept you engaged? Because if you're not your own inspiration, sometimes it's hard to come by.
Yeah. When people always need to compare you to something. So when you are, when you're trying to launch something that's brand new, no one's ever heard of before, it's hard because people need that information to go, what is this like? And at that time, it was another organization that was in New York. Their name is escaping me at the moment. I apologize. But Journey, I think it was. And so everybody kept comparing us to that. They were having these live sessions, very similar to like trade shows and these panel speaking events and all of this stuff. And we kind of were doing like much smaller niche kind of events. It was invite. I was sending messages. I had people tell me, how could you be so kind? Because and it wasn't because I thought, gosh, that's terrible. This person hasn't even experienced kindness, that this is like, I don't trust this person because they're being too nice to me. I don't understand this. So I did a beta test with a bunch of leaders as well for a program we called Leaders for Tomorrow. Because I thought, all right, we're going to get into education. I'm an educator. We're going to educate people. I had rented a WeWork space for collaborating, rented rooms, got guest speakers, like told them, I want you to come up with a class, and orchestrated this whole curriculum and invited 12 people to each session, made it super affordable. It was under $20 to attend this event. And then it was a workshop. Like it was definitely a workshop. Had me enough to, okay, I can pay for a speaker or, get some food and stuff, etc. And then we'd figure out like what price sensitivity people had. So at that time, I watched people in the rooms, like how they were interacting. Like we don't have like, training that's like for ourselves. And so I was trying it out to go, hey, let's pull from our community, have them teach. So they did that. And I remember, and I'm pulling my hands at this because this is the memory, was a gentleman who actually treated me really rudely. And I mean, like, so rude, because he was like, isn't this like the ACF or da 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 da, said all this stuff. And we had I had a lot of conversations at that time trying to prove who we were and what we were doing, because there was a lot of distrust. So anyone who engaged in a conversation, even if it was not good, I still was like, let's have a conversation about this. I'd text a message, or I'd send a messenger message, or I'd say something online. I'd be like, well, let's talk offline because I don't appreciate what you just said, or whatever. Right. And so then I'd engage in that. This person who came to one of our events, I still invited him because it was actually about finances. And I had an expert. I knew he had just lost his restaurant. And I know that, like, that puts somebody in a big, significant hardship, right?
Absolutely.
And so I reached out to him, even though he was rude to me and he was whatever. I found out that, he had a circumstantial family situation that put him into financial trouble, that his business, that ran him to the ground. And I had to prove to him, it's one of my most proudest moments, actually, one person, right, that I spent the time saying, I assume that this might be how you're feeling, and I have a resource to help you. Would you accept, even though we've had our falling out? And he goes, after how rude I've treated you? Like, he actually said that, and I just kept saying the same thing, broken record, just to prove trust. This is what I think you should do. You should try this. It's going to be a small niche, etc. One of my dear friends, Brian Tucker, taught this course. He was also in the nice thing was every single teacher was in hospitality, so they understood the business. And then he said, I saw him at the entire time at the table with his hands like this. He was very nervous. You always get that question after you've transferred from one job to another, or maybe you're in transition. Oh, where do you work? And then how do you explain? There's that shame thing again, that like, I'm not working somewhere right now. So we actually built in cultural systems to make sure that nobody was actually asked those questions, because I'd see that time and time again. Or like, oh, do you want to drink? We made them sober free zones. We designed the environments where I had people say, thank you so much for doing that, because every event, it has alcohol. Thank you so much. Like, I didn't get asked this. That gentleman wrote me back after saying how much he appreciated my effort and energy to reach out to him.
It reminds me of some of my worst customers, the ones worse, all relative, but the ones who complained the most or would push back the most. And it was only when, I understood that was an opportunity, because when you can spend time with somebody like that and have them come on your side, forget it, man. They're the best advocates you'll ever. So instead of shying away from those tough conversations, that's an opportunity to dive in and say, okay, so let's like, what else is available here? By the way, I just want to kind of quickly show this, James Shirley, very dear friend of mine and chef in Hawaii, believe it or not, got the job of his life, or his dreams right now. And he's also going to be on the podcast, but we got some people signing in. We really appreciate the comments. And if you're watching this live or you're watching on a recording, I'd also like you to post in the comments what you think community is. If there's one that you feel that serves you, and if not, what do you most want to see? And Maria, I also kind of want to throw this up on the board for a second and talk about this. I found this from the Stanford Review, a quick explanation of community. I mean, it's a small piece of a much bigger article, but I love that part about members of a community have a sense of trust, belonging, safety, and caring for each other. And that treasured feeling of community comes from shared experiences and a sense of not necessarily the actual experience of shared history. And as a result, people know who is and isn't part of their community. And this feeling is fundamental to human existence. And, in your efforts to, when you call it a grassroots organization, it really is it was all done by guerrilla marketing. And even though that guy tried to compare you to the ACF, that's where I met you, because you were doing a presentation at the ACF. I mean, at some point you got to go into the lion's den, right?
Yep.
And I think you were doing a workshop around, or talk about how to motivate millennials. And I didn't quite like, I thought it was more nuts and bolts at the time when I first met you, but having come to know you a little bit better, I understand that that's a back door into the deeper conversation about what our culture is and what we value. And the fact that at some point we abdicated our responsibility for mentorship and coaching and deep development work with those that look up to us. And I also want to speak very quickly to this idea of shame. Last week I did the Friday Food for Thought was this kind of idea, the allure, the power and the peril of, your very own chef coat, how can a piece of white cloth and black stitching kind of hold so much sway? At least it did over me, so it's what I thought the jacket meant, and then the reality of what it meant. And some of those realities came a little bit too late. But if I was stuck in my shame about who I'd been and what I'd done, it would, put my ass in the dust, and I wouldn't be here as a conduit like you, trying to share information that can actually change people's lives in the moment, because we need everybody, and everybody's voice matters. So how much work is it to actually set the organization up, the community, and how much effort is involved in maintaining it? Right? Because I think that might scare some folks off. And I'm thinking also about like an internal community. Jensen Cummings likes to say, in the kitchen, we're not a family, right? That, in some ways you would never treat family that way, or they wouldn't treat you that way. And so there's as far as I'm concerned, it's a contractual obligation amongst one another about what I'm going to bring to you and what you're going to bring to me. So what does that upkeep look like?
Well, it starts with collective intention, right? So if you have a purpose, it just starts there. And then getting others to know what your intention is so that they can align with that purpose. If they say, I agree, I share the same beliefs, that's how you and I became great friends.
That's true.
Right? And so we do the same thing with all of our relationships. We find people that we align with, or we make our core group of people that we say, this is my entourage, and I only engage with them because I love sharing that energy. For me, it's a larger group of people that also are challenged with what's going on in today's workforce. And I think that, the maintenance is the harder part than actually creating the community, because finding where those individuals are, what platform they're on, where do they like to engage, like that takes a little time, right? We're now largely on Instagram, but we never were on that platform. I started on YouTube, I pushed Facebook, and then I realized, well, they're very visual learners. And so I was like, actually, they're all on Instagram. And so it's like, I don't want to spend my energy spreading myself so thin, because I'm not a team of 16, 17 people. We're not two. I got Julie, who's, incredible, has been with me since the beginning too, and was one of my former students, is in the industry, and a mom who works remotely. Like, I wanted to do something that it doesn't take a lot of people. So I intentionally like being small. I mean, I want to grow, but I also, I think the hardest part too is not getting hard on yourself when we compare to other people, right? Because now there's more people in the pool than there ever was before. I don't get the question of like, oh, what is that like? No one says that in the past few years, people are like, I'm so thankful you exist. Thank you for what you do. And I always feel like I'm not doing enough, and people will say thank you. But it was Anthony Bourdain's passing that really kicked that into gear, where I heard feedback from more people, rather than me calling everyone individually to say, I'd like you to be a part of this. Let me tell you what's going on. I literally spent my time talking to every single person. And then it grew into like, oh, I heard about you from someone else, and I just want to thank you, for that. And that's the maintenance is the hardest part.
Well, I like, your journey in building that community makes me think about when I started the podcast, which was 7 years ago. And at some point along the way, after 4 or 5 years, I decided that I needed to recalibrate my energy somewhere else.
Mm.
As if for some reason I didn't think what I was talking about, the conversations that I was illuminating, the solutions or the roadmaps or the recipes, what do you want to call it, for a more satisfying life, not only as a culinarian but also as a human being, that they're kind of passe. And the same thing happened to me when Anthony Bourdain came out with Kitchen Confidential. I had a book almost complete called Lapdog about a line cook. It was actually a sous chef that I worked with, and his book came out, and I started reading through it, and I realized, oh shit, man, he said it all. Like, why would I even continue to do that?
Yeah.
And what I'm realizing more and more and more is that everybody's voice matters.
Yes.
There'll be people that are going to be attracted to your mission and your voices that might be differently than me. And the landscape of support groups and people actually out there in the community kicking ass, moving towards this new vision of what hospitality could look like, is just amazing, man. In 6 years since you started, like the last 3-4 years, it's just been an explosion.
Yes.
Just great. And it's, great fun to have some really sharp minds who are going to challenge my beliefs or thoughts. And it's just like, it's a really, really juicy time to be involved in this conversation, don't you think?
Yes, and what always has kept me motivated is actually the law of diffusions of innovations. And so it's like I always have to tell our team, of anybody who ever gets involved, that like it's like a curve, and you're gonna have the early adopters, like the people who are like stand in line getting the iPhone, and they're like the first people to sign up, and then you have these other after the innovators, then you're going to have those adopters that are like, well, I see that a couple people are already doing this, so then I'm going to get involved. Then you have the early majority. Now, like, it grows bigger, and it literally flows like this. And now that we've kind of seen these 3 phases in our own community group, I now understand it, but sometimes it gets hard when you have people involved and are helping and advocating, and literally we are hands-on, one-on-one combat. We send a message individually to a person or group, and we talk to them with 2 to 3 people on our team, and we tell dozens of stories. And now we're going to be telling 100 with our new kitchen culture. But some people don't get involved unless they see a lot of other people getting on the same train. So it does take time. I'm not going to lie about that. But
what did you call it? The law of?
It's a diffusion of innovation. It's a legit thing. There's tons of marketing research, all sorts of stuff that really talk about, like, some people are innovators. They're the first people to do it, like you and I. And then people see, like, oh, there's a trend here. I always find it interesting that things that we think about and things we talk about, we've always been early innovators in those conversations.
Yep.
And then when I see it happen, I'm like, that's amazing, because we were on it. People will ask us, like, hey, who do you think you should talk to? And I don't know everyone, but it's amazing to me now, where I'm like, wow, actually here's another group that does that. Now there's a collective of groups pulling together.
So cool. The collective. I mean, that is so powerful. I'm like, it tingles when I get on those calls, and I'm like, so nice not to be the only one talking about this.
Yeah, to your earlier point about being lonely. Yeah.
Well, and please forgive me, because this is not necessarily a pat on the back. But I realized that for most of my life, I have been probably, 4 to 5 years ahead of trends. And when you're that far in front, it's almost like being Jonathan Livingston Seagull, right?
Mm.
You got to leave the flock, got to go learn your stuff, and then you got to come back and then try to communicate that to the flock. And most of them are just like, what?
Yeah.
What? Get out of here, man. You're full of shit.
Exactly.
And I wanted to kind of represence this for the last part of our conversation, because I think this is probably the most critical part, is
Mm.
that community is not a place, a building, or an organization, nor is it an exchange of information over the internet. Community is both a feeling and a set of relationships among people. People form and maintain communities to meet common needs. What are our common needs right now?
Well, we've found vessels because it's all about communication,
Right.
right? So carrying those things that people need, we have to do it through certain touch points that make sense. So it's just like any model. You have to think about, like, how do you deliver? How's the experience? What's the value? We know that people want to, think about themselves and be more mindful in their own personal journeys.
Sure.
They want resources for mental wellness. They want to know about health insurance, which is why we do all of those things. They want to know that other people are in the same boat as them, even if it's just one story that we share, like, on our page. To feel less isolated, because that was really important. But we do that through creating knowledge. I realized early on, I am not the expert. I'm the facilitator. I'm the connector,
Oh,
right? And so I know my role. I know my role strength. I know what I'm good at. And so then I had a meeting with 12 people that were experts in health. And that helped me realize that I'm like, well, I can connect people to those resources. And that makes sense for the lifestyle I want to live and the community I want to provide. Like, I don't get paid to do this. This is something it's not a job for me. It's
sure.
something I just want to do and serve doing. So it had to be peer based, because social change doesn't happen if their peers weren't doing some of these actions.
Sure.
So then I had to have a writer on our team so that I can communicate those messages and translate, like, what is that story, so people can identify and foster curiosity. That was really important, because if I want people to normalize new behaviors, I need them to get curious about how other people do it, because all they know is their own friend circle and their own experiences. So our platform helps them do that. And then at the end of the day, we link them to resources they need to know more about. No one ever tells me, I shouldn't say no one. Often people don't tell me that, like, oh, that connection worked out. It's not no one. But I find that I'm like, oh, wow, I'm so glad to see that relationship fostered and grew. And I'll usually find out in some other way. And I think that's beautiful, because then I'm like, that's how community works. I don't have to be the one always connecting the dots. People can connect to each other.
Yep.
And then create value. And so that's where I see the power of community being really successful.
I think one of the things that certainly I did not have a good grasp of until I actually heard it articulated in this book called Who Not How is, I always thought that, again, nobody ever said this to me explicitly, but, as the chef, as the director, and because I'm capable and because I'm quick on my feet and get a lot of stuff done, I always felt like, the success of the operation rested solely on my shoulders. So when you have that kind of weight on you, it's awfully hard to pivot and involve other people in the decision-making process or even the execution of it. So this whole idea of, like, staying in your lane and doing what you do well is so powerful. I hired a virtual assistant and a, Fiverr.com, what can you say? And also a co-producer, because I realized that if I took as much time with all the episodes as I did with yours, I'd never get
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you support.
But now I've got it broken out in little pieces so that it's much easier to, the workflow is already established. So there's only a couple parts here and there that I have to change other than the main conversation. But it's also looking at that going like, yes, I'm a podcaster, but that's not my entire experience. Yes, I'm a chef, but that's not everything I do. So how can I continually become the best version of myself that I dreamed it to being before I even got here, without pulling myself all the way down? Because as long as I try to hold on to it, that'll strangle it, you know? And so, yeah.
Hiring people is really important to move this forward.
Yeah.
And, for myself, we knew that we couldn't really do that. I had enough funds to hire one person or maybe have a part-time
Sure.
individual. And I was like, well, then for us, the leverage needs to be collaboration. So I have strategic partners. I have people that I know, we're aligned. We have similar things. What can I do for you? Let me reciprocate. Let me, it's like trade and barter.
Yeah.
Like right now I have a film production company, I Love It Films, and Eric Lovett Jr., who did some productions, even in testing. He's an experimenter. He was okay with being an innovator at the beginning. Like, you know what? Let me just try this with you because actually I want to practice my skills in this area because this is a live broadcast and I haven't done that in a while.
Right.
And I'm like, let's do it. Let's collaborate. I already know that he has a high quality, and it was the fear of not being eliminating that there's no fear of failure in this.
Right.
Like if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'll delete it, or I'll just express that like, hey, this is what happens. We're experimenting right now, and you got to see the behind the scenes. Like, it's fine.
And you also didn't limit yourself to the conversation or the thought like, okay, I don't have any money to spend on this, therefore it can't happen. Like it's like the monetary is just one piece of it, but there's equivalent value. There's, things that, skill sets that you can swap or teach somebody that has real value in the marketplace. But the point is not to get stuck on, I can't do it. Like, no, there's a way, just how. And so the book makes the point. If you're worried about how you're going to do it, that's your first indication that you need to look for the who. And it could be a conversation. It could be, hey, this is a test. We're just both experimenting.
Yep.
I'll cook you a meal. There's other ways to do that, but
I always buy them lunch or dinner.
There you go. Absolutely. But the thing is weird. It's like, even in a lot of kitchens, I've run across sous chefs and chefs who have such a difficult time, having other people take over some of their work because they're so tied to their identity. I had a sous chef. He'd come in at 2:00. He'd spend the next 2.5 hours on the back table and knock out all this prep. And we used to have a game where we'd set up all the Lexans across the back of the table to like, look what I did. But I couldn't get him up on the line. And I said, James, you got to start moving some of the stuff, delegating it. And he's like, yeah, but everybody's stupid. Like, really? Everybody's stupid? Really? Or you just like I get it. Like, It feels good to be able to do that kind of stuff. And then when you pass it over to someone else, there's that one thought of like, oh my God. By the way, I as you were talking, I thought this was really important because the Ken Burns documentary for Muhammad Ali is on there. And one of these, service is the price you pay for your rent in heaven is one of his favorite quotes. And I think, as human beings and professionals, it's important for us to continue to learn, whether that's reading 10 pages of a entrepreneurial book every day or whatever. But this whole idea of being in service to something greater than yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, what else is there?
I think too, like to your point earlier about, letting go and delegating or sharing something. It's nice that I know that about myself. I enjoy it. Like when people take things or I give them, I have that extension of trust in people with this project because there's not, I don't have a financial obligation to somebody. I don't have to speak to, a board that makes all the decisions. Like it's more, this is an environment for learning. And I think because of my education background, these dots connect really well where I've seen students learn something for the first time. And I'm like, you have to give it to them or they're not going to learn how to do it. But I've been able to identify specific people in our group by a category of their skill set that they provide for our group. And it helps rejection feel less hard when you know that these individuals are there to help you do a specific thing. So, for example, like I have connectors in our group. I have, creators who have this great idea and they call me and like, Maria, I want to start this project. What do you think? And I'm like, hey, let's talk about the details, see what works for you and for me, and let's do it. And people know Cooks Who Care is going, wow, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago and all of a sudden it's here. It happened. I have collaborators, and then I have sharers, but I know who they are. So
Right.
when I'm not going to ask a sharer to collaborate with me, because that's not going to work, right?
Right.
They also have their own contributions to the group.
I just want to go back to something that you said earlier, which was, you saw the need for this particular community. You probably
Yes.
discussed it with Scott a million times, and you said,
A
finally,
million.
yeah, right. But one thing I learned from you specifically is this dedication to, just because you thought of it doesn't necessarily mean it's yours,
Mm.
and that's only a starting place, and that the only way that you have an evolution of that is by sharing, communicating, and then listening, like being willing, some would say courageous and brave, to not only put yourself out there. I'm kind of like you. I don't have any problem talking about the things that I've done, or as a way of creating kind of an allegory to not having to make that same mistake. But I also get that that when you release this thing that you've thought of, this kind of like little creation in yours, that there might be that kind of moment where you're like, ooh. But again, having it take a deeper breath in the context of the group and letting it evolve is so juicy, man. So juicy. Like the things that you and your team have been able to do, not only with, the one writer, but also the assistants and the volunteers.
Yeah.
I mean, you have put real value, especially during the pandemic, but even more so now. And just because you want to.
Yeah. And it's had to change 80
Yeah.
million times. Somebody called me up and said, Marianne, like, I don't know how you do it to keep it sustained. And I think it's also being okay that it's changed. Like, I've come up with so many plans, and they don't all come to fruition.
Right.
The pandemic really had a switch. I was going to do a membership model, and then I saw others fail. And then I asked people who did a membership model, like, tell me what didn't work. And I was persistent about it. I think being flexible, that it's going to adjust and adapt. And that's a good thing, because if you can get through those moments, then you're like, wow, we really have something here. And that they're still willing to follow us along the way. Like, I feel honored.
Yeah. How much does patience play into your overall strategy? Again, understanding, of course, that, we as a community, fraternity, craft, patience is not necessarily one of our strong suits.
No. I'm persistent. The hardest part about my job is getting people to respond to me. The hardest. So I'm very patient in the fact that I think of the purpose. Like, how long does it take to convince somebody? How long does it take for them to make this a priority? It's going to take a long time.
Sure.
Think about changing a behavior. I think about how hard is it for me to change a behavior? It's hard. I recently, said that and shared it. I felt the responsibility as a leader to say that, like, it is hard. So I think patience is key, because, even our team, like, we get frustrated and we're like, oh, I try to reach out to them, but I don't want to bother them. I don't want to this and that. And I'm always like, what if we didn't reach out to them? What if we never had that conversation? Maybe it's not the right time right now. That's fine. Right? But if we don't have these conversations, we will just continue to do what we always do. We won't change our behavior.
Right. Because there's really never compelling reasons to do so. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons to stay the same. It's like, okay, because the effort that's necessary in order to change your vibration, change your thought patterns so that it communicates differently with your body and starts the healing. I mean, that's a slog, man. That is a lot of work, especially for someone who's been in the industry for 10, 15 years and has a very well practiced habit at, maybe self-medicating with things that aren't necessarily the best for that. And more than anything else, it doesn't get the stress out of the body. And I also wanted to say thank you very much for your post about your recent health challenge and the vulnerability with which you shared that, because I also recognize that there may be folks out there who are going through similar things and don't feel that courageous yet. So
It was really helpful and cathartic for me. Like my husband was like, Are you sure you want to share that like online?" And I said, I've been thinking about it all week. I journaled about it too many times. I'm like, oh my God, there's not enough paper for what I'm thinking. I kept saying it to people. And then as soon as I shared it online, I felt a breath of like, okay, that's exactly what I needed to do. And I felt a chill when I said that, but I needed to do that. Like for me too, like this, personally, my religious faith also helps me through this journey, and
Sure.
opportunities keep happening. So I always feel like if the door is going to shut, the door is going to shut. That's just the way it'll be. But I'm going to put all my energy in while it's here. And if it keeps going, I'll keep doing it. And I always said it to my husband. I said, if doors keep closing, I'll stop.
So can you give me an example of what it looks like for a door to open?
A door to open would be like somebody contacts me and they are like, hey, do you want to collaborate on this event? Or like, hey, I have this opportunity for a fundraiser to help these people. Like I just keep getting this influx and it's random. We're going to start having a phone number line here soon. Hopefully this year is our hope. And, but it just doors keep opening in that way. I just had a recent fundraiser for something that helped us raise over $500, and it was actually a bearded lady's trans like kind of performance. And I was let's do it. Like,
that's fun.
And they dedicated the show to us. Like they didn't need to do that. Like, and we pre-planned this before COVID. They were worried about the COVID cases. It was completely outdoors. I feel bad for the performance and event sector, even through all this. And I was just like honored, like, you want to do this for Cooks Who Care? Because I've been in their neighborhood giving meals to like everybody, and they're like, we want to do this for you. And I was like, what? All right. Like, I'm honored,
That's great. And so as long as people are asking, just keep moving.
Keep moving.
So what if nobody's asking? What if you identify something? So in particular, the focus of my podcast is about those culinarians who understand that, their self-development, their self-awareness is critical to not only their professional career, but also their personal health. And so that might not necessarily be a lot of folks, but it's getting bigger. And so I'm not dissuaded with that as kind of like a way as you started, the thing that you didn't receive was actionable care. Yeah. So that's what you felt was really your gift to give. So I know a shaman here in Asheville who did a ceremony for me, and he told me this story about his mentor who came from Africa, and told him a story about what they do in the village when a woman is about 6 or 7 months pregnant. They actually build this big fire and have a ceremony, and she's brought into the circle. And then the shaman gets down on his hands and knees and whispers to the baby in utero and asks it, what's its name? And what medicine that is being required now are they bringing with them when they come in? So this idea of each of us having some type of medicine that is actually being called for, that is being asked for, even if they don't hear the call, is really, really powerful. I mean, how cool would it be to know what your mission was like 5, 6, 7?
Exactly. I do feel it's my purpose, and I've taken a lot of time to think about that, and I know that I won't do it at the expense, of my family or myself. That's a definite lesson of recent. But that's when I know, and then all these opportunities opened up after communicating that. So I'm like, all right, there are people that this means something to people, and for me, I mean, this means something deeply to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be spending 6 years not being paid to commit to something with this amount of energy. And I wake up every day thinking about it and how I can make a contribution and an impact. And I want to leave this world, doing something for people, like how I started this. Like, I feel good when I do this. And when that gets out of balance, and that's another, conversation. But
So
Yeah.
the Maria Campbell Handbook of Building Community. Can you give us kind of like the baby steps, the first 3 steps into someone really feeling called to do something about something somewhere?
yeah, start collaborating with somebody, get an ally. That's the first thing. Like, get somebody who's in your corner that you feel will innovate or believes in your vision. Find a platform that helps you communicate that vision once you have some individuals who are really interested. And then it's up to building the engagement. What kind of engagement do you want to have? What kind of messages do you want to relate to them? You're bringing new possibilities for others to try. It has to be meaningful to people, where it's not just like a one-off, and it doesn't have any kind of sense of deeper connection for people.
Mhm.
And the sense of urgency, get on it. If you're thinking about it, just do it. I think that, you'll find how you add value, like, along the way. People wait for perfection too often and don't jump in.
Right. Can you just tell me step number 3 again?
Yeah. So,
You found your allies.
allies,
Now you found the platform where your people are.
platform, engagement.
Engagement.
Make sure your messaging is meaningful.
Uh,
Apply a sense of urgency.
engagement.
Yeah.
Messaging.
Yeah.
Fine-tune messaging.
Yeah.
Just putting this in the chat because
Oh, cool. I could type it.
that's I'm struggling. That's okay. Engagement. No. And whatever. Fine-tune your message.
Yep.
And lastly,
and I think the sense of urgency. You just got to do it.
So in internet marketing speak, a sense of urgency usually means that you're putting some type of arbitrary timeline on taking action, but that's not really what you mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, just jump in. Like, if you're talking about it enough, it means something to you.
Right.
It definitely. I think we don't listen to ourselves enough. We think like, well, we have to have all of these resources, and it's got to look like this if other people are going to listen. If you have a purpose and you want to tell people about it, that's all you need, and that's how I got started.
I'm going to add one more. Step number 4. Hold it all loosely. It'll change, right?
Yeah.
As if someone's getting hung up about the way it looks.
Yes.
Sorry, folks. Hold it all loosely. It'll change.
Yeah.
I want people to be able to have,
It's 4 o'clock.
look at this and say, okay, got it.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, why not? I mean, we're here for actionable intelligence, actionable care, and to be in service. And I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy day to do this, running 3 different organizations. But the one thing I know, Maria, is that if I ask, you'll always say yes, which always makes me a little hesitant to ask. not anything about you, but I just want to make sure that we are respecting each other's other obligations and commitments. So thank you very, very much. Where can people connect with you?
They could
go ahead.
Go ahead. Cookswhocare.org, new website, great resources. Super excited about it. We're on Instagram, Cooks Who Care, our IGTV channel. There's over 65 interviews. We're telling over 100 stories about people in new kitchen culture, which Adam is a part of. So you should check out his features. And yeah, it's there. We are on Facebook. We have a private Facebook community for those that are in the industry, just because there needs to be that private space sometimes. Right. But yeah.
Thank you very much, Chef.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time. And if you hold on here, I'm going to send us out with that crazy video again. And I just want to have a quick chat before you leave. Is that cool?
Sure. That's cool.
Thank you, ma'am.